The billionaire hadn't heard his son speak in over a year, until the boy took a homeless girl's hand and whispered one word, "safe." That's when he knew. This wasn't a coincidence. It was the beginning of something that would change them all. Night falls in Chicago on a cold winter day. The trees stood bare, brittle silhouettes under the sodium glow of streetlights. Wind curled along the frozen pavement, pushing dry leaves into corners where no one walked anymore. On a park bench near the far end of Grant Park, two children sat, still and small, beneath a faded brown coat that smelled faintly of soap and something long gone. Hannah pulled the coat tighter around her little sister, folding it like she remembered their mum used to. Grace's head rested on her lap, her breath shallow and damp against Hannah's jeans. "Don't fall asleep yet," Hannah whispered, nudging Grace gently. "Tell me something first." Grace's lips were pale, her voice thin. "Will they find us?" Hannah didn't answer right away. She looked around the dark. Empty swings moved faintly in the breeze. From the nearby street, a siren blared once, then disappeared. "No one's looking for us," she said quietly. "That's the good part." Grace sniffled and coughed, curling into herself. "But if they do, will they take me to Florida still?" There it was again. Florida. The word had been floating around the foster home for weeks. A couple wanted a little girl. Just the younger one, they'd said. Hannah had overheard it through the crack in the staff door. That was 2 nights ago. "Hannah." Grace's voice trembled, slipping into their mother's language for a second, something she hadn't done in a while. "What if they take me away for real?" Hannah's fingers found Grace's and squeezed. "They won't," she said, eyes sharp now. "I heard them. I know what they were planning. That's why we're here." She wasn't crying, not anymore. 8 years old was old enough to know how to stop tears when no one would come, just because you were sad. "We're staying together," Hannah said firmly. "No one's going to split us. I promise." A pause. Then, softer. "Cross your heart," Grace asked. "Cross my heart," Hannah whispered, and traced the motion across her chest. Grace smiled, barely. Then she shivered again. Hannah pulled the coat up, feeling the cold bite at her fingers. She remembered her mother's words from long ago, when the hospital room still smelled like lemons. "If one day I'm not there, you take care of your sister. She's little. I'm so sorry. I can't be with you guys longer." Grace's cough deepened, sharp and dry. Hannah adjusted the coat again, tucking it tighter under Grace's chin. "Remember when Mom used to say the cold couldn't find us if we stayed close?" Grace nodded, eyes closing for a second. Hannah's voice lowered, almost to herself. After she got sick and passed away, everything moved fast. Hospitals, boxes, that room with all the other kids. She paused, swallowing. "They said we'd be safer there, but they didn't ask if safe meant together." A sound broke the quiet. Boots scraping gravel. Hannah tensed. From the shadows near the path, an old man appeared with a flashlight slung lazily in his hand. He wore a blue parka and a thick grey scarf, and his breath steamed in the air. "Evening," he said, voice low, but not unkind. "You girls all right?" Hannah shifted slightly, angling herself in front of Grace. "We're not doing anything wrong." The man scratched his beard. "Didn't say you were, but it's freezing out here." He looked down at them a moment longer, then sighed and pulled something from his coat pocket. A wrapped sandwich. He set it on the bench, 3 feet away, and turned to leave. "You shouldn't sleep here," he said over his shoulder. "Lots of things come out after dark. Not all of them got shoes." "Thanks," Hannah said quietly. When his footsteps faded, Grace peeked out. "Was he a cop?" "Number just someone." They shared the sandwich. Grace took small bites, careful and polite the way their mother taught her. Hannah tore the crusts off. They weren't very good, but it helped. Later, when Grace fell asleep again, Hannah reached into the coat pocket for warmth and found something papery instead. A folded scrap. Her breath caught. She opened it, slow, like it might vanish if she moved too fast. The handwriting was her mother's. If someone kind finds this, please help Hannah and Grace. They are good girls. They just need a chance. Mum. Hannah stared at the note for a long time. Then she folded it back up and tucked it close to her chest. Somewhere nearby, a laugh echoed. Older kids, maybe. A dog barked once. She needed to do something. Grace's forehead felt warm. Too warm. Across the street, lights flickered inside the night shelter. People came and went, bundled up in layered clothes, some dragging bags. Hannah hesitated. She hated going there. They asked questions. They had forms. She didn't want them to see her and think she was small and weak. But Grace let out a cough, deeper now. Hannah stood. She pulled Grace up slowly, wrapped her arms around her, and began to walk. As she passed a corner near the benches, she heard a boy's voice behind her. "Don't go there," he said. She turned. A thin boy, maybe 9, stood beside a shopping cart, half covered with tarp. His hair stuck out under a torn hoodie. "They'll take your sister if you say she's sick," he added. "They don't want sick kids in there." "I'm not telling them anything," Hannah said. "I just need a blanket." He shrugged and pointed to a pile of newspapers near the bench. "Use those. Better than nothing." "What's your name?" "Theo," he said. "I'm Hannah. That's Grace." Theo nodded. "Don't trust them. You'll learn." She took 2 sheets and nodded thanks. "Tell her a good story," he said before she walked off. "Makes the cold feel smaller." As they reached the shelter's back gate, Hannah hesitated. A woman in a red vest opened the door a crack. "No beds left," she said quickly. "I just need a blanket and some water." "That's all," Hannah said. The woman blinked, surprised, then disappeared. When she returned, she handed Hannah a worn blanket and a plastic bottle. "Get somewhere safe," the woman murmured. Hannah nodded. She didn't say thank you, but she meant it. That night, curled up again beneath the trees, wrapped in the new blanket, Hannah held Grace tight and whispered, "Tomorrow, we'll find something better." But inside, she wasn't sure where better even lived anymore. The sky outside was bleached grey, with snow pressed like fingerprints against the edges of the windows. The city felt far, muffled and untouchable from inside the villa, where everything gleamed, but nothing lived. Eric Madison sat at the edge of the leather sofa, one hand holding a tablet, the other still as stone on his knee. He tapped the screen gently. A video began to play. Soft laughter, shaky camera, a woman in a navy sweater holding a cupcake, the flame of a birthday candle flickering. "Happy birthday to you," his wife's voice. Eric paused the video halfway through. The screen froze on her smile. Across the room, Liam sat cross-legged on the plush rug, a sea of Lego bricks scattered around him. He was building something, a tower maybe, or a wall, but not really watching his hands. His expression was distant, his body still, as if he was inside something only he could see. Eric studied his son for a moment longer, then set the tablet down. "Hey, buddy," he said softly. "Can I sit with you?" Liam didn't look up. A red block slipped from his fingers. Eric joined him on the floor anyway, knees stiff. "That one looks cool. What are you building?" No answer, not even a shrug. Eric picked up a yellow piece and held it out. "You want this one?" Liam took it silently, his small fingers brushing Eric's for a second before going back to work. Eric let out a slow breath. Then, after a moment, bo, van, o, jai, con, try, he whispered, the words slipping from another lifetime. Say one word, any word. I don't even care which one. Nothing. Footsteps approached from the hallway. Claire, his assistant, appeared in the doorway. Practical dress, dark-rimmed glasses, holding a tablet of her own. I can reschedule the investor call, she said quietly. If you need more time. Eric didn't move. They'll complain. They always complain, Claire replied. Then she hesitated. You know, there's a retreat center upstate. Family-based therapy. Horses, nature trails, the whole thing. We've done therapy. I know. Her voice softened. But maybe Liam needs a new place. Somewhere he hasn't already learned how to be silent. Eric looked at Liam again. Maybe. Claire stepped closer, lowered her voice. I'm just saying, the silence in this house isn't helping either of you. Outside the tall windows, snow began to fall. Light, dry flakes drifting past glass that had never known condensation. Eric stood slowly. Can you push the call to next week? Claire nodded. I'll tell them it's family leave. She left without another word. Eric moved to the fireplace. Electric, controlled by an app he never bothered to use. A photo sat framed on the mantel. Julia, mid-laugh, head tilted back. He'd taken that shot in the kitchen with pancake batter on her cheek. He touched the edge of the frame with his thumb. Behind him, Liam clicked another block into place. Eric turned back. Hey, want to help me pick dinner tonight? Liam paused. Eric crouched beside him again. We could make something, like we used to. You choose. We'll go get the stuff together. Liam blinked slowly, but didn't shake his head. I was thinking spaghetti, Eric said, testing. Or grilled cheese with tomato soup. Still no answer, but Liam set down his block and looked up, just briefly. Eric caught it. That one glance. You and me, he said gently. Just us. From the courtyard below, a movement caught his eye. The gardener, Walter, was trimming the boxwoods. Liam used to follow him around, back when he still laughed at bees and called them buzz dogs. Eric turned to see Liam watching Walter too. The boy didn't smile, but he didn't turn away. Later, while Eric gathered his coat and keys, Claire reappeared at the door. Where are you taking him? Supermarket, Eric said simply. He's picking dinner. Claire looked at him for a long second. You're doing the right thing. Eric nodded, one hand already on the elevator button. I just want him to remember what home felt like, before it got so damn quiet. The elevator chimed. Liam stepped inside beside him, small fingers brushing the edge of Eric's coat. Eric didn't speak again until the doors closed. Then he looked down at his son and said softly, Maybe tonight we'll cook. Maybe tomorrow we'll find better. And this time, though Liam didn't say a word, he didn't let go of Eric's coat either. Late afternoon, with mist clinging to the edges of windshields. A thin drizzle hung in the air like breath caught mid-sigh. The sky pressed low, dimming the store signs and stretching the headlights into long, wet streaks. Outside the automatic doors of a neighborhood supermarket, two small figures stood curled beneath a threadbare coat. Hannah shifted her weight from foot to foot, trying to keep Grace steady in her arms. The younger girl's skin was hot against her shoulder, her damp breath fluttering against Hannah's collarbone. She pressed her cheek to Grace's forehead, whispering. Once upon a time, she said softly, there was a little house made of cedar and sky. It had round windows and a red chimney. And it could move on tiny legs. No one could see. Grace stirred faintly, her voice a breath. Did it have a door? It had one door, Hannah said, but it only opened when someone said the right word, a word that meant safe. From where he stood near the cart return, Liam saw them. He didn't know what made him stop. Maybe it was the way the older girl was rocking the smaller one, her voice almost too quiet to hear. Maybe it was something in the shape of her arms. Tight, determined, like she'd built a shelter out of herself. Or maybe it was the word. Safe. Hannah didn't notice him at first. She was focused on Grace, on trying to keep her upright, on the small red flush creeping across her cheeks. Behind her, a man in a Navy security vest approached, brows drawn. "Hey," the man said, voice gruff, but not unkind. "You girls can't stand here, not in front of the doors." "We're not inside," Hannah replied quickly. "We're not doing anything." "I know," he said, glancing toward the passing shoppers. "But folks complain. It's not good for business." Hannah swallowed. "My sister's just sick. We're not asking for anything." The man, Mark, his name tag read, hesitated. His hand dropped from the radio clipped to his belt. "I'll give you 5 minutes," he said. "Then you need to move along." She nodded. "Thank you." Liam stepped closer. He didn't understand what he was feeling. Not exactly. Something warm and hollow in his chest, like when he looked at the picture of his mom and couldn't remember the sound of her laugh. The girl turned and saw him then. Just a boy in a yellow raincoat, watching her. Grace whimpered. "It's too loud here." "I know," Hannah murmured. "We'll go soon." Liam took another step forward. Rain flecked his cheeks, though he didn't seem to notice. Then, without thinking, he reached out and touched Hannah's wrist. Her head jerked up, and that's when he said it. "Safe." The sound cracked the air like the first note of a forgotten song. Hannah froze. Mark stared. And from behind them, Eric Madison dropped his phone. He had just stepped out of the store, groceries in one hand, his phone pressed to his ear. Claire had been saying something about a board memo when he heard the voice. His son's voice. He moved fast. "Liam," he said, dropping the bag. Apples rolled onto the wet pavement. "Liam!" Liam turned, but didn't let go of Hannah's wrist. Eric crouched beside him, breath short, stunned. "Liam," he said again, quieter now. "What did you say?" The boy didn't answer, but his hand tightened around Hannah's. Eric looked up at her. She was pale and thin, with mud on her sleeves and shoes too small for the cold. Her arms were trembling, but not from fear, only from holding her sister too long. Eric's voice was gentle, but full of urgency. "Miss, I'm sorry, but what did you do?" "I didn't do anything," Hannah said. He just came up to us." She looked down at Liam, who was now reaching toward Grace, his brows knitted in a way that almost looked like worry. Mark stepped back. "That kid hasn't said a word, not in months. He comes here all the time, never speaks, just follows that man." Eric ran a hand over his face, suddenly unsure of everything. Hannah hesitated, then said, "She's sick." "My sister?" "I was just trying to get her warm." Eric glanced at Grace, now limp in her arms. "She needs help." "I know." He stood slowly. "My name is Eric Madison. That's my son, Liam. He doesn't talk. Or he didn't." Hannah nodded, not sure what to say. Eric knelt slightly, adjusting his coat around Grace's legs. "What are your names?" he asked gently. Hannah hesitated, then, clearly, "I'm Hannah. This is my sister, Grace." He nodded. "Hannah. Grace." Then, softer, "Can I ask why you were sitting there? All alone?" Hannah looked down, fingers tightening around the bottle of water Mark had handed them earlier. "Our mom got sick. Really sick. She didn't make it." Her voice didn't break, but something in her jaw did. "We stayed at a place with a lot of other kids, but they were going to take Grace somewhere else. Far. So we left." Eric's chest ached. He looked between the two girls, then over to Liam, who hadn't let go of Hannah's sleeve since they arrived. "And now?" Hannah met his gaze. "Now, we don't have anywhere to go. I have a car, a place nearby. You don't have to stay," he added quickly, seeing her tense. "But she shouldn't be out here. Not like this." "I don't know you," Hannah said. "I know," Eric replied, "but maybe that doesn't matter right now." She looked down at Grace, at her flushed face and damp hair. Then she looked at Liam, still holding her wrist. "Okay," Hannah said softly, "but just for a little while." Eric nodded. "Just a few days. To help. That's all." He reached down and picked up his bag, brushing the rain from the apples. Liam let go of Hannah's hand and reached for Eric's coat, silent again, but present. Mark handed Hannah a packet of tissues before they left. "Stay dry, all right," he muttered. "You too, little one." They crossed the parking lot together. Not a family. Not yet. Just four people, drawn together by a single word that had cracked something open none of them knew they still had. Hope. Before we continue, tell me what country are you listening to the video in? This evening, first snowfall whispering against tall windows. The city lights shimmered below like frost-bitten stars. The driveway was silent, the sleek black car humming to a stop beneath the overhang. The front door opened with a quiet sigh, letting the warmth spill out into the December dark. Hannah stepped in first, Grace bundled in her arms, her boots tracking a faint trail of melted snow onto the marble. The foyer was too big, too bright, too clean. Grace turned her face into Hannah's neck. "I don't like it," she mumbled. "It's too shiny." Hannah lowered her voice. "It's just a house, Gracie." "No," Grace whispered. "It's watching." A hallway opened to the right, long, lined with recessed lights, walls so white they felt like blank pages. Hannah took a few steps and heard nothing under her shoes. No creak, no echo. It didn't feel real. She turned slightly and whispered, "Do you hear? No one is yelling at us here." Grace blinked up at her. "Really?" Hannah nodded. "Really?" Eric's voice came from behind. "There's a guest room this way. The doctor will stop by in the morning to check on her." Hannah turned, not answering, just holding Grace tighter. Liam stood in the entryway, still in his yellow coat, watching her. His gaze wasn't shy. It was quiet, deliberate, like he was trying to understand something without words. They followed Eric through the living room. Everything was in grayscale, soft grays, whites, glass. A fireplace flickered, but didn't crackle. The warmth felt like it had been designed, not lived in. Claire stood near the stairs, arms crossed. She hadn't spoken since they arrived. Now, she did. "Eric," she said, voice low but firm, "can I speak with you?" He hesitated, then turned to Hannah. "Just a minute." Claire led him toward the kitchen. Hannah sat on the edge of a low sofa, Grace still curled in her arms, already drifting into a fevered half-sleep. Liam sat cross-legged on the floor, a sketch pad beside him. He reached into a tin of colored pencils and began to draw. Quietly, deliberately. After a few minutes, he slid the pad toward Hannah. It was a house, small, with smoke curling from the chimney. Two figures stood outside, one taller, one holding a teddy bear. In the window, a third figure watched. "Is that me?" Hannah asked softly. Liam nodded. "And her?" She pointed to the teddy bear. He nodded again. She looked at him carefully. "Do you draw a lot?" Liam didn't answer, but he picked up a red pencil and added something new, a door with a heart on it. Hannah smiled, just slightly. "She'll like it." "Thank you." From the kitchen, voices filtered through, muted, tense. "She's a child, Claire," Eric said, "with a sick sister. I couldn't just leave them there. Claire's tone was sharper. And what if that story isn't true? You don't know them, Eric. You don't know her. I know, Liam spoke. Claire paused. Then, and that justifies letting two strangers stay in your home. Eric didn't respond right away. When he did, his voice was quiet. He held her hand, Claire, and said one word. That's more than I've gotten in a year. A longer silence. Then Claire emerged, composed but cold. She gave Hannah a glance sharp enough to cut. Dinner's in the fridge if you want it, she said flatly to Eric. Then she left. Sophie, the housekeeper, stepped in from the hallway, holding 2 mugs of warm milk. She looked at Hannah and Grace, then at Liam on the floor, and said nothing, just set the mugs down on the table, along with a small folded blanket. She gave Hannah a nod. If she wakes coughing, there's syrup in the upstairs cabinet. 2nd shelf. Thank you, Hannah murmured. Sophie hesitated at the door, then added quietly, Not everyone who comes through here stays. But I hope you do. When the hallway emptied, Eric walked back over. Grace stirred, eyes half-lidded. She looked at him with that dreamy gaze only half-sick kids get and said, Uncle, are you our new dad? Eric froze. Hannah's face turned crimson. I'm sorry, she said quickly. She's confused. She didn't mean. But Eric raised a hand. It's okay. He crouched beside the sofa, looking at Grace, then at Hannah. I know this is strange, he said softly. I'm not asking you to trust me, but I'd like you both to stay until she's better. Hannah glanced down at her sister, then over at Liam, still drawing, still calm. Just until she's better. Eric nodded. That's all I'm asking. Hannah swallowed hard. Okay, she said. Later, as the house quieted and Grace finally slept for real, Hannah opened the door to find something waiting outside. 2 pairs of small slippers, one pink, one blue, placed neatly beside her own worn shoes. She stood there for a moment, then picked them up and closed the door without a sound. Morning sun warmed the dew off garden chairs. The backyard stretched wide and open, tucked behind the mansion's glass walls. Shrubs were trimmed into soft curves, and a stone path cut through the lawn like a trail in a secret park. The cold had eased for the day, letting the air feel gentle for once. Hannah sat cross-legged on a picnic blanket near the hedge, with Grace tucked at her side, and Liam just far enough away to seem distant, though he never stopped listening. Colored pencils lay scattered between them. Sophie had brought out a tray of orange slices and cinnamon toast, which now sat half forgotten on the edge of the blanket. Okay, Hannah began, opening the little storybook she'd started sketching herself. Who remembers what the house was made of? Candy, Grace shouted, waving her hands. And gumdrops for windows. Liam smiled faintly and reached for the pink pencil. And chocolate for the roof, Hannah added. But not too much, otherwise it melts when the sun comes out. They giggled. Grace bent over her sketchpad and started drawing something round and squiggly. This is the jelly bean bathtub, she explained proudly. It smells like strawberries. I wish it were real, she murmured a moment later. I'd eat the whole kitchen. From the patio, Claire stood just inside the sliding door, watching. Eric had joined her moments ago, coffee in hand. Claire glanced at him sideways. They've gotten close fast. She's just telling a story. He's laughing, Claire said. Liam, look at him. That girl's got more of his attention than any therapist you've hired. Eric didn't speak. Claire's voice dropped. You don't think this is dangerous? No, Eric said quietly. I think it's different. That's not the same thing. He didn't argue. Down on the lawn, Liam had taken Grace's drawing and began coloring in her jelly bean tub with careful, serious strokes. Grace pouted, but didn't stop him. "Hey," she whined, "that's mine." He paused. Hannah leaned forward. "You okay, Liam?" He blinked, then held out the pink pencil to Grace. She took it and smiled like it had been a bouquet of flowers. "You're not bad for a boy," she declared. Hannah snorted. "You're doing good," she said gently to Liam. "Thanks for sharing." Liam looked down again, but this time there was something steady in his shoulders, something quiet and proud. Later, as the sun crept higher, Hannah stood up and stretched. Her sleeves rolled back, revealing faint bruises from carrying Grace so long in the cold. She caught Eric's eye from the patio. He noticed, but said nothing. Instead, he walked down the steps. "I was thinking of making lunch," he said. "Any ideas?" "Grilled cheese," Grace chirped. "With jelly beans," Hannah added, and everyone groaned. Eric chuckled. "No jelly beans, but grilled cheese, I can do." "Chuko so omot min kong?" Grace asked suddenly, out of nowhere. Eric paused, looked down at her. "Sometimes," he said, "but not today." Claire turned away sharply from the patio, disappearing inside. In the kitchen, Sophie was stacking dishes when Claire came in, arms folded. "He's not thinking clearly." Sophie didn't look up. "You mean he's feeling something for the first time in months?" "This is reckless. That girl, she's—" Claire paused. "She's a kid, and she's smart. She knows how to be what he needs." Sophie dried a cup slowly. "Or maybe she's just kind." Claire shook her head. "You sound like you want them to stay." Sophie finally looked up. "I want him to remember he has a heart." That afternoon, Hannah sat in the sun, tracing blades of grass between her fingers. The air smelled of cut herbs and distant rain. Liam sat beside her, sketchpad on his lap. He didn't speak, but he drew. She peeked once. 4 stick figures, holding hands. One taller, one with pigtails, one with a teddy bear, one with a scribbled beard. He shaded a roof above them, then wrote a word, awkward, tilted, but clear. Family Liam stood, walked away, found Eric on the patio, reading a newspaper. He placed the drawing on Eric's lap, then sat beside him without a sound. Eric looked at it for a long moment, then folded the paper once, carefully, and slipped it into his coat pocket like it was made of glass. He didn't say, "Thank you," just reached out and rested a hand gently on Liam's shoulder. And Liam didn't move away. Late afternoon, the garden's edges blurred in golden light. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the wide lawn. Insects buzzed lazily near the hedges, and the air carried the soft smell of warm soil and fading lavender. The stillness was gentle, almost lulling. Hannah lay on her back on the blanket, one hand behind her head, the other reaching up as if to trace something in the sky. Beside her, Grace giggled, rolling over a patch of clover, her bear in one hand, and a leaf crown, askew, on her head. Liam sat nearby, stacking smooth stones on top of one another, eyes narrowed in concentration. Eric watched them from the garden bench, a book open but unread on his lap. He caught the faint rise of laughter from Grace, followed by a word, quiet but clear. "Sweet," Liam said. Hannah propped herself up instantly, her eyes wide. "What?" Liam blinked, as if surprised by himself. "You said—" "Sweet." He gave a small shrug, but there was the ghost of a smile on his lips. Eric stood and took a step toward them. "That's his second word," he murmured, and the tone in his voice made Sophie, walking by with a tray of tea, pause mid-step. "That's progress," she said quietly, smiling. But just then, Grace sat up abruptly, her head cocked to one side. "Did you hear that?" she asked, eyes bright. "Hear what?" Hannah asked, already half distracted by the magic of Liam's word. "A kitty," Grace whispered, switching into the soft lilt of their mother's old voice. "A kitty." Before Hannah could react, Grace had stood up and darted toward the back hedge, chasing a sound only she seemed to hear. "Wait, Gracie, no. Don't go too far." The younger girl was already halfway across the lawn. Hannah scrambled to her feet, panic rising like static in her chest. Her voice cracked. "Grace!" Claire, who had just stepped onto the patio, caught the tension immediately. "What happened?" "She ran off. I was watching her, and then—" Claire's brows furrowed. "Where?" "She said she heard a cat." "Grace!" Eric was already moving, crossing the grass in long strides. "I'll check the east hedge. Claire, can you look by the gazebo?" "I'll try near the fence line," Sophie called from the porch, already pulling on gloves. Liam stood frozen beside Hannah, unsure of what to do. She turned to him. "Stay here, okay?" she whispered. "Don't go anywhere." He nodded, and then she ran. Bushes scraped her arms, bare skin stinging from low branches as she stumbled through the thickening paths at the far edge of the garden. Her breath came fast, and she hated the sound of it, hated the way her chest hurt and how the world spun. "Gracie!" she screamed. "Gracie, answer me!" Silence. Then, faintly, a hiccuped sob. Hannah turned sharply, crashing through a patch of overgrown ivy until she reached the large cedar tree near the corner wall. Its roots lifted slightly from the ground, creating a hollow space near the base. There, tucked beneath it, knees drawn up, was Grace. Her bear clutched tightly to her chest, her crown of leaves crumpled in her lap. Her cheeks were red, eyes wide. "I didn't mean to," Grace whimpered. "I just wanted to see." Hannah dropped to her knees. Her arms wrapped around Grace before the girl could finish her sentence. Her whole body shook. "Don't do that again," she choked. Don't ever run like that, okay?" "I'm sorry," Grace whispered. "I got lost." Hannah held her tighter. "You're mine," she whispered, voice breaking. She hadn't cried since the hospital, not at the shelter, not even when they'd run. But now, the tears came hard, hot, and angry, slipping onto Grace's hair as she rocked her sister gently. Eric appeared a moment later, stepping carefully through the low brush. When he saw them, he paused, then knelt beside Hannah. She didn't look at him, but she didn't pull away when he reached out and placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "You did good," he said softly. "You found her." "I wasn't watching," Hannah whispered. "You were," he said. "You just looked away for a second. That's all it takes, and you found her. That matters." They sat there like that for a while, three bodies breathing, grounding in the silence. When they returned to the house, Grace's hand never left Hannah's. Claire watched them from the doorway, her arms crossed, mouth tight, but her gaze lingered a second longer than usual on Hannah's tear-streaked face. Sophie met them at the stairs with a warm blanket and a fresh cup of mint tea. "No kitty?" she asked Grace gently. Grace shook her head. "Just when that meowed." Sophie smiled. "That happens sometimes." Later that night, as the house settled into stillness, Eric passed by Hannah's room and saw the light still glowing under the door. He knocked gently. "You okay?" Hannah looked up from where she sat beside Grace's bed, brushing the girl's hair back from her forehead. "I didn't keep her safe." Eric stepped inside. "She's asleep." "That means you did." Hannah didn't answer, so he said, one more time, firm but quiet, "You did good, Hannah. Really good." And this time she nodded. Just once. But it was enough. The house sat in stillness, its corners steeped in quiet at midnight. Only the low hum of the refrigerator and the soft tick of the grandfather clock broke the hush. The kitchen lights cast a pale glow over granite counters and gleaming steel appliances. Outside, the wind nudged the trees gently, like it didn't want to wake anyone. Claire stood at the kitchen island, arms folded tight over her chest. Eric leaned against the counter, coffee in hand, untouched. His tie was loose, sleeves rolled, the wear of the day etched into the lines around his eyes. Claire broke the silence first. "We need to talk about this, Eric." "I figured," he said. She gestured toward the hallway, her voice low but strained. "This isn't just kindness anymore. You're keeping them here, sleeping under your roof." Eric stayed still. "Grace is still recovering. And Hannah," Claire cut in, "Hannah is smart. She knew exactly how to pull Liam in. You think this is just coincidence?" Eric's jaw tightened. She didn't pull him in. He chose to speak. "That little girl is what? 8? Claire's voice dropped, clipped. "Do you know where she came from? What she's seen? They're undocumented, emotionally unstable." Eric looked up sharply. "They're children." Claire didn't flinch. "Exactly. And they are not your children." From the doorway, Hannah froze. She hadn't meant to hear. She had gotten up to get water, padding barefoot past the staircase with her arms folded over her chest for warmth. But then she heard her name, and Grace's. She stepped back a little, just enough to stay in the shadows of the hallway. Claire's voice had softened, but not lost its edge. "You have a responsibility to Liam. He's just beginning to open up. You bring in 2 strangers, and now you want to... What? Adopt them? Be a savior?" Eric rubbed his forehead. "I don't know what I want. I just know I don't want them back on the street." "Then what? You want to raise them? Teach them to fit into this life?" Claire's tone cracked then, barely. "You can't fix the loss, Eric, not even by filling the house with more children." There was a long pause. The fridge ticked softly. Claire reached into her bag and slid a folder across the counter. "I spoke with the shelter this morning. Social services has a place ready. Warm beds, clean records, proper guardianship." Eric didn't touch the folder. "You haven't even looked at it," she said. "I don't need to." Claire exhaled sharply. "I'm trying to protect you. And I'm trying to do the right thing," he replied quietly. That's when Sophie entered the kitchen, holding 2 mugs of tea. Her footsteps were soft, but deliberate. "You've both forgotten something," she said, placing the mugs down. "They're not files or liabilities. They're kids." Claire turned. "This isn't about feeling sorry." "It's not," Sophie said, calm but unyielding. "But maybe it's about remembering what it means to be seen. Because that girl, the one you don't trust, she looks at Liam like he's more than his silence. And that little one, she calls this place our room when no one's listening." Claire said nothing. Her eyes narrowed, but her lips pressed into a flat line. Sophie added gently, "You don't have to like them, but you don't have to be cruel either." Claire walked out after that, not slamming the door, just disappearing down the hall without another word. Hannah stood in the darkness, heart pounding. She hadn't meant to spy, but now she knew. They weren't supposed to stay. They were a burden, a risk, a file in a folder. She turned, walked softly back to her room. Grace was still asleep, curled up beneath the blanket Sophie had tucked around her. The pink slippers sat at the foot of the bed. Hannah crouched beside the nightstand and pulled out the small cloth bag Sophie had given her for her clothes. Quietly, carefully, she began folding. Shirt, sweater, socks. She grabbed Grace's bear and set it near the top. Liam appeared in the doorway. He didn't say anything, just stood there in his pajamas, holding the pink pencil Hannah had given him 2 days before. She met his eyes. "I'm not mad," she said, voice almost a whisper. "But we don't belong here. Not really." Liam stepped forward and held out the pencil. She hesitated, then took it, closing her hand around his. "Thank you," she said. He didn't smile, but he didn't look away. Grace stirred as Hannah buttoned her coat. "Is it morning?" she asked groggily. "No," Hannah whispered, "but we have to go now." "Quiet, okay?" Grace rubbed her eyes. "But our room—" Hannah's voice cracked. "It was, but it's not ours." She helped Grace slip on her shoes, zipped up the little jacket Eric had given her. They tiptoed down the stairs. Hannah checked the door, unlocked. The security light blinked softly, but didn't make a sound. Outside, the cold met them like a hand to the chest. Hannah wrapped her arm around Grace, pulling the hood up over her head. They walked down the driveway, past the trimmed hedges and the silent trees. Grace clutched the bear tighter. Inside, the house slept on. Eric came upstairs not long after, carrying an extra blanket. He reached Hannah's door, knocked gently with his knuckle. No answer. He turned the knob, just slightly. The room was dark. The beds were empty. On Grace's pillow lay the bear. On Hannah's nightstand, the pink pencil. And nothing else. Midnight, wind raced down the streets, like something searching. The park looked different now. Trees stood bare against a bruised sky, the ground dusted in a thin crust of snow. Streetlights flickered with a tired glow, casting long shadows over empty benches. Hannah sat hunched beneath one of them, her knees pulled tight to her chest, arms wrapped around Grace. She had given Grace the coat, kept her close, whispered old lullabies into her ear even when her own lips were numb from the cold. Grace's cough had worsened. It came in bursts, deep, rattling, painful. "I don't like this," Grace whimpered. "I don't like this place." "I know," Hannah whispered, brushing damp hair from Grace's face. "I'm sorry. I want to go home." Hannah froze. She looked out across the park, at the empty swing set and the shadows stretching toward the street. She didn't know what to say. "Where's home, Gracie?" Her voice cracked. "Where is it?" Grace didn't answer, just curled closer. Earlier, they'd tried to return to the bench near the old shelter, where the light stayed on late, and sometimes someone left sandwiches. But tonight, there was nothing. Just a plastic bag fluttering against the trash bin, and a group of older teens loitering near the playground. Hannah had led Grace away, clutching her tighter with each step. Now her hands trembled from the cold and from something deeper. Shame, maybe, or grief. She had thought she was doing the right thing. She'd thought leaving quietly would protect them, but it hadn't. Across town, Eric was driving. He had woken to the empty room and the sound of wind pressing against the windows. He hadn't needed to check the whole house. He knew. He just knew. Now, his knuckles were white on the steering wheel, eyes scanning every block, every alley, every shadow that looked like it could hide two small girls. Liam sat silently in the passenger seat. He hadn't spoken since Eric shook him gently awake and said, "They're gone." But now, as they passed under the orange glow of an old street lamp, Liam sat forward suddenly and pointed. "There," he said. Eric slammed the brakes, tires skidding lightly on ice. Ahead, two shapes huddled on a bench, one small, curled tightly, the other barely bigger, holding on like she could stop the cold by will alone. Eric was already out of the car. Hannah heard the crunch of footsteps. She looked up, eyes bleary, heart lurching in her chest. Liam was running toward her. He didn't hesitate. He didn't stop. He threw his arms around her, nearly knocking her back, wrapping his small frame around her like he'd been waiting all his life to do it. "Come home," he said. Just 2 words, but Hannah heard everything in them. Behind him, Eric knelt beside her, his breath visible in the cold. "Oh, God," he murmured. "You're freezing." Hannah didn't speak. She didn't know what she was allowed to say. Eric gently lifted Grace, who whimpered but didn't resist. Her skin burned with fever. "We're taking her home," he said, firm. "She needs—" Hannah began. "I know. I'm taking care of it." She hesitated. "You heard what she said," she whispered. "Claire. About us." Eric looked at her. Really looked. "I heard what she said," he replied. "And I know what I'm saying now. You're coming home." Liam tugged on her sleeve. Hannah looked down and saw him holding out the pink pencil. Somehow, he'd brought it. She took it with shaking fingers, closed her hand around his. Back at the house, Sophie had already turned on the lights and prepared a warm bath. She said nothing when Eric carried Grace in, only nodded once and moved into action. Claire stood in the hallway, silent. She watched as Hannah stepped through the door, face blotchy, hands red and raw. Their eyes met. Claire said nothing. Hannah didn't look away. That night, after Grace had been tucked into a warm bed, her fever checked, her cough eased by medicine, Eric came to sit beside Hannah outside her door. She had changed into dry clothes. Sophie had made her tea. Still, she sat cross-legged on the floor, back against the wall, like she didn't believe the softness of the room would hold. Eric didn't say anything for a while. Then, "You ran because you thought you were being kind." "I ran because I thought we weren't wanted." Eric shook his head. "I should have talked to you first. That was my failure." She looked down at her hands. "I was just trying to keep us safe." "I know," he said. "But Hannah, this is your home too, if you want it." Her lip quivered. "What if Claire—" "She doesn't decide that. I do, and Liam." Eric turned his head slightly. Down the hallway, Liam was asleep, one hand tucked beneath his cheek, the other still holding the pink pencil. "He's already decided," Eric said quietly. They sat in silence. Outside, the wind slowed. Inside, the warmth began to settle again. Late morning, the courthouse was quieter than expected. Sunlight pooled across the tiled floor of the family court lobby, pale and cold. The windows were tall and bare, and everything echoed a little when you moved. Shoes clicking, papers shuffling, someone clearing their throat in the hallway. It didn't feel like a place where new families were made. Hannah sat stiffly on a bench just outside the courtroom, Grace leaning into her shoulder, legs swinging. Liam sat beside Eric, hands folded tightly in his lap. He hadn't said a word all morning. Grace tugged at Hannah's sleeve. "Is this like school?" she whispered. Hannah looked down, trying to smile. "Sort of. But no one gives you grades. They just ask if you want to stay." Grace blinked, unsure. "What if I say no?" "You won't," Hannah said. "We both know where we want to be." At that moment, a woman in a navy blazer stepped into the waiting area. She was tall, with kind eyes behind silver-rimmed glasses. "You must be the Madison party," she said. Eric rose. "Yes, Eric Madison. These are the children." The woman nodded. "I'm Marlene Walters. I'm the guardian assigned by the court to represent the children's best interests." She knelt slightly, meeting Hannah's eyes. "I've read all your interviews, Hannah. I know you've taken care of your sister a long time. You've done a remarkable job." Hannah didn't speak. Marlene turned to Grace. "And you must be Grace." Grace squirmed. "Are you the judge?" "Nope," Marlene smiled. "The judge wears a robe. I just get to tell her what I think, and I think you're both very brave." She stood again and turned to Eric. "Everything looks good. The reports from your home visit, the health clearances, the school enrollment forms. Even Liam's therapist signed off." Eric nodded, but his jaw was tight. "You ready?" she asked. He looked down the row, at Hannah, at Grace, at Liam, then back up. "Yes," he said. We're ready." Inside, the courtroom was smaller than expected. A single judge sat at a high wooden bench. The ceiling lights hummed faintly overhead. Claire sat in the back row, her posture straight, arms crossed loosely, but she was here. The judge scanned the papers in front of her, then looked over her glasses. "Mr. Madison," she began, "you are petitioning the court for full adoptive custody of 2 minors, Hannah and Grace Parker, ages 8 and 5. They are not related to you biologically or legally. You are a widower with 1 biological child, age 6. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor." The judge's tone remained neutral, procedural. "And do you understand what full adoptive custody entails? That it is permanent, with all legal and parental rights extended to the children as if they were born to you?" Eric nodded. "I do." The judge looked over the papers again. "And you're aware of the psychological, emotional, and financial responsibilities involved?" "I am," Eric said, then added more quietly, "I've thought about it more than anything else I've ever done." The judge leaned forward slightly. "These girls have no known family, no next of kin. But they are not yours by blood, Mr. Madison. Are you absolutely certain?" Eric turned his head slowly. Hannah was watching him. Grace leaned into her, small hand around her sister's thumb. Liam stared ahead, pale and still. Eric inhaled, then spoke, clearly, without hesitation. "They don't have anyone else, Your Honor. But I do. I already have 3 children." The room went silent for a beat. Then Liam stood. He stepped forward, clutching something in his hand. A folded drawing, the same one he had kept on his nightstand. He reached Hannah and took her hand. Then, turning to the judge, he said, "They're my sisters." It was the longest sentence he had said in 2 years. The judge blinked, just once. Then she cleared her throat, glanced at Marlene. Marlene smiled. "As the children's legal advocate, I support the petition completely." The judge nodded slowly. "Well?" She turned back to Eric. "In that case, I find no grounds to deny the petition. Mr. Madison, your application for full adoptive custody is approved." Eric exhaled, but didn't speak. Instead he stood, turned toward the children, and opened his arms. Hannah didn't move at first. Then Grace bolted, arms flying around Eric's waist, burying her face against his coat. Liam followed, still holding Hannah's hand. Hannah stepped forward last. When she reached him, Eric knelt. She whispered something he didn't repeat. He just held her tighter. At the back of the room, Claire stood slowly. She didn't approach. But when Liam turned, glancing her way, she smiled, just slightly, and nodded. On the way out, Grace looked up at the high windows and whispered, "Is this what starting over looks like?" Hannah squeezed her hand. "No," she said. "This is what home looks like." That weekend, the backyard of the villa was sun-warmed and humming with life. The breeze carried the scent of grass and something faintly sweet, maybe cinnamon from the kitchen. Sunlight spilled through the maple branches, painting soft gold onto the patio stones. A bird chirped from the fence line, and everything felt like it had exhaled. Eric sat on a garden bench with a comb in one hand and a YouTube tutorial paused on his phone in the other. In front of him, Hannah sat cross-legged on a cushion, arms crossed and expression skeptical. "Are you sure about this?" she asked. Eric squinted at the screen. "How hard can a braid be?" "Famous last words," Hannah muttered. Grace, sprawled nearby with colored chalk, snorted. "Make sure he doesn't tie your hair into a knot, Hannah." "I'm aiming for something more elegant," Eric said, lifting a strand with exaggerated care, like moderately untangled. Hannah rolled her eyes, but something flickered beneath it. Soft amusement, maybe even comfort. She stayed still. Eric's hands fumbled at first. He parted the hair wrong, then dropped one section twice. After a few minutes, the braid started to take shape, uneven, slightly crooked, but a braid nonetheless. "There," he said, sitting back. "Try not to move. It's held together by sheer willpower." Hannah reached behind to feel. "It's not terrible." Grace popped up beside them, eyes wide. "You did it? Let me see." She leaned close, inspected the braid, then broke into a grin. "You didn't ruin it. It's kind of cute." Eric feigned offense. "Is that the official review?" "You passed," Grace declared. "Next challenge, the apron." In the kitchen, Liam stood on a stool, carefully measuring sugar into a bowl. Eric wore a pink apron with cartoon cats and the words, "Bake it till you make it," written in glittery letters. Grace had insisted. Hannah cracked eggs beside him, while Sophie supervised the oven. "Careful, not too much," she warned, tapping the bag of flour Liam was lifting. "Your lemon cake will turn into a lemon rock." Eric glanced down at the flour streaked across his apron. "Some of us were not born bakers," Grace cackled. "You look like a kitchen exploded on you." "I feel like one did," Eric muttered. Hannah wiped her hands and gave him a pat on the back. "You're doing better than your braid. That's comforting." Claire appeared in the doorway, holding a paper bag. She didn't step into the room, just leaned on the doorframe, watching. "You're still wearing that thing?" she asked, nodding at the apron. Eric shrugged. "There was a vote. I lost." Grace waved. "Hi, Claire. We're making lemon cake." Claire smiled faintly. "So I see." She turned to leave, then paused, pulling her phone from her pocket. A moment later, Eric's phone buzzed on the counter. He checked it discreetly while whisking batter. "You didn't save anyone, Eric. You just learned to love like a father." And that was enough. Claire. He stared at the message for a long moment. Then he tucked the phone away and went back to stirring. Later that afternoon, the cake cooled on the counter and the backyard was full of soft voices and laughter. Hannah braided Grace's hair now, the roles reversed. Liam drew quietly with chalk on the patio, a stick-figure family standing beneath a sun with a crooked smile. Eric sat on the steps, sipping lemonade, watching them. Grace turned suddenly, her eyes bright. "Can we make up new names?" she asked. Hannah raised an eyebrow. "Why?" "Because we're a new family. New families should get new names." Eric smiled. "What did you have in mind?" Grace thought. "I want to be Cookie." "Of course you do," Hannah said. Grace pointed at Eric. "And your daddy, Eric." Eric blinked. He hadn't expected that. He opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. So he nodded. "Only if I get to call you Cookie." She beamed. Liam, without looking up, said quietly, "Can I still be Liam?" Eric reached over and ruffled his hair. "Always." As the sun began to dip low, Sophie lit the lanterns strung across the fence. Warm light settled into the corners of the yard. The air smelled of sugar, lemon, and cut grass. Inside the hallway, Eric paused by the living room. His eyes landed on something new. There, on the wall above the side table, framed in light wood, was Liam's drawing, the one with 4 figures holding hands under a roof. Someone, maybe Sophie or Claire, had written a title in soft cursive underneath. Our House. Eric stood there for a long moment, hands in his pockets, watching the drawing like it might shift if he blinked. Then he turned toward the door. Outside, laughter spilled from the backyard like music, and Eric walked toward it, no longer a man rebuilding his past, but a father living his present. Late afternoon, the light poured through the windows with a kind of stillness. It fell in soft, angled rays across the floorboards, touching the spines of books and the edge of the long sofa. The house smelled faintly of baked lemon and sun-warmed fabric, and somewhere a clock ticked with no hurry. All four of them sat curled up on the wide living room couch. Grace nestled against Hannah's side, her head resting on her sister's arm. Liam lay with his head on Eric's lap, one hand draped loosely over his chest, the other holding a half-read picture book. Hannah's legs were tucked under a blanket, a novel open on her knees. No one spoke for a while, just pages turning, breathing, the kind of quiet you earn. Sophie appeared briefly in the doorway with a tray of warm cookies, placing it gently on the coffee table without a word. She gave Eric a small smile, then turned back toward the kitchen, her footsteps fading like music on carpet. Eric reached forward, offering the plate to Grace. "Still warm," he said softly. She took one, then broke it in half, and handed the other piece to Hannah. "It's the good kind," she whispered. "The kind that sticks to your teeth." Eric chuckled low in his chest. "That's the measure of a good cookie." Grace nodded. Yes, the stickier, the homier. Hannah leaned her head against Eric's shoulder. She hadn't said much all day, but now something shifted behind her eyes. She glanced up at the wall, where Liam's drawing now hung in a wooden frame, the crayons still bright. 4 small figures, hand in hand, beneath a crooked red roof. Above it, in clear, careful lettering, someone, Claire, most likely, had written, "Home is here." Hannah looked back down, voice almost a breath. "Daddy," she murmured. Eric turned toward her, setting his book aside. "Yeah?" She hesitated, then leaned closer. "Now we really have a home, right?" Eric didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked around the room, at Liam's toes poking from under the blanket, at Grace softly humming something she'd made up, at Hannah's earnest, searching face. Then he looked at the drawing again. He remembered how empty that wall had once been. And now it held something. He nodded. "Yes, we do." Hannah's shoulders eased, the words she hadn't said folding quietly into her lap. A few minutes later, Liam stirred. He sat up and padded over to the side cabinet. From the drawer, he pulled out his old box of crayons and walked over to the drawing on the wall. "Wait, what are you doing?" Grace asked, half laughing, sitting up. Liam didn't answer. He pulled the cap off a green crayon and reached carefully toward the framed picture. He wasn't drawing over it, just near it, in the space next to the frame, on the wall itself. Eric opened his mouth, hesitated, then said nothing. Liam finished and stepped back. They all turned to see what he'd added, a small tree, bright and simple, and beside it, in his neatest handwriting yet, "So it can grow." Grace clapped once. "Can I draw a cat?" Hannah grinned. "Only if it lives in the window." Eric tilted his head. "I think that makes this an evolving masterpiece." "Like us," Grace added. "Exactly like us," Hannah said. As twilight settled in, the room grew quiet again. The hum of the city softened beyond the windows. The last of the cookies disappeared. Liam fell asleep first, his head tucked against Eric's side, breathing even. Grace followed soon after, blanket up to her nose. Hannah stayed awake the longest, eyes half closed but alert. She looked over at Eric. "Do you think Mom would like it here?" she asked suddenly. Eric looked at her, surprised. "I think," he said, "she'd be proud of the way you take care of Grace." Hannah bit her lip. "I didn't always. There were times He touched her hand. "You did what love does. You stayed. That's more than enough." Silence stretched again. Then, "Eric," she asked, voice smaller now. "Yes? Is it okay if I just call you Dad?" His breath caught. He didn't move, just nodded. "Yeah," he said, his voice thick. "I'd like that." She didn't say anything else, just leaned her head against his arm. Outside, the porch light blinked on. Inside, the house held its breath in that fragile, glowing hour between day and night. The drawing on the wall shimmered slightly in the fading light. The words beneath it, "Home is here." Now joined by the green of a growing tree, the outline of a cat in the corner window, and a tiny red heart no one remembered drawing, but no one erased. It was all there, exactly where it was meant to be. What did this story make you feel? If this story moved you, comment 100 below and share your thoughts. We'd love to hear what part stayed with you the most. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more unforgettable stories every week.